Zektar stood on the bridge of the massive warship Voidhammer and watched the small blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. His forearms crossed over his chest as he studied the intelligence reports floating in the air before him. Earth. Another primitive world full of weak creatures that would fall in less than a week. The Krillian commander had seen this same scene 53 times before. 53 worlds had surrendered to the might of the Krillian Empire. 53 species had knelt before their superior technology and firepower. This would be number 54. War leader Thax approached from behind, his heavy footsteps echoing across the metal floor. The older Krillian scales were darker than Zektar's, marked with battle scars from decades of conquest. "The humans have detected our approach," Thax said, his voice a low rumble. "Their primitive radio signals are buzzing with panic." Zektar turned one of his heads toward his superior, while keeping the other focused on the data screens. "How long? Until they surrender? Intelligence estimates 3 days once we begin orbital bombardment, maybe less." Thax moved closer to examine the tactical display. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles. Their ships move slower than our cargo vessels. They have no energy shields. What about their population? 8 billion. Scattered across one world and a few small moon colonies. They fight among themselves constantly. Perfect for divide-and-conquer tactics. Zektar nodded and dismissed the floating reports with a wave of his hand. He had read similar assessments before, attacking the crystal beings of Zephyr Prime. Those creatures had surrendered after losing just 2 cities. The tree people of Velthar had given up when the Krillians destroyed their sacred forests. Humans would be no different. "Deploy the fleet in standard intimidation formation," Zektar ordered. "Begin scanning for military installations and population centers." Across the bridge, Krillian officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. This was routine. The Empire's expansion had been unstoppable for 3 centuries. Advanced weapons, superior numbers, and perfect coordination made every battle a foregone conclusion. The first surprise came 2 hours later. "Commander." "The communications," officer's voice cracked with confusion. "Human vessels are approaching our position." Zektar looked at the tactical display. Dozens of small ships were moving toward the Krillian fleet. They were crude things, barely more than metal shells with engines attached. Against the massive Krillian dreadnoughts, they looked like insects. "Are they surrendering?" Thax asked. "No, sir, they're accelerating." The human ships spread out as they approached, their engines burning bright blue flames. Zektar watched with mild interest. Perhaps the humans would attempt some kind of desperate attack before inevitably surrendering. It would make for an interesting report. Then the first human ship struck. The small vessel, no bigger than a Krillian shuttle, slammed directly into the side of the cruiser Nightblade. The explosion lit up space like a small star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. "What happened?" Zektar demanded. "The human ship was loaded with nuclear explosives," the sensor operator reported. "They deliberately crashed into Nightblade." Before anyone could respond, 3 more human ships struck other Krillian vessels. Each collision resulted in mutual destruction. The humans were killing themselves to take down Krillian ships. "This makes no sense," Thax growled. "Why waste ships in suicide attacks when they could surrender?" The answer came through intercepted human communications. A female, voice calm and clear, spoke over the radio channels. "This is Commander Lisa Carter of the UES Defiant. We are beginning our attack run on the enemy flagship." Zektar watched the small human destroyer accelerate toward his own ship. His weapons officers were already targeting it, but Carter's vessel weaved between the laser blasts with surprising skill. "Shields to maximum," Zektar ordered. "Destroy that ship." "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from their commander." "Put it through." Lisa Carter's voice filled the bridge. She sounded young, perhaps no older than a Krillian cadet. But there was something in her tone that made Zektar's scales prickle with unease. "To the alien fleet," she said. "You came here thinking we would surrender. You thought we would beg for mercy. You were wrong. Every ship you destroy will cost you 2 of your own. Every human you kill will take 10 of you with them. We will never surrender. We will never kneel, and we will make you pay for every inch of our world. The transmission cut off just as the Defiant struck the Voidhammer's shields. The explosion was enormous, sending shockwaves through the massive dreadnought. Emergency lights flashed as damage reports flooded in. Shield generators, 4 through 7 are offline, an officer reported. Hull breach on deck 15. Zektar stared at the wreckage spinning away from his ship. One small human vessel had damaged a dreadnought that had conquered entire star systems. Not through superior technology or tactics, but through simple, brutal sacrifice. How many ships have we lost? He asked quietly. 17 destroyed, 9 severely damaged, came the reply. And the humans? 23 ships destroyed. All hands lost. Zektar felt something he had never experienced in 53 previous conquests. These humans had chosen to die rather than live under Krillian rule. They had turned their own ships into weapons, their own lives into ammunition. War leader Thax moved beside him, studying the tactical display with growing concern. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. No, Zektar said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. They're just desperate. Once we begin orbital bombardment, they'll see reason. But as he watched more human ships emerge from behind their moon, each one accelerating toward certain death and determined to take Krillian vessels with them, Zektar began to wonder if he truly understood what kind of enemy they faced. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to make victory cost more than the Krillian Empire could afford to pay. 3 days after the first space battle, Zektar led his assault forces toward the human moon colonies. The plan was simple. Take the mining stations and orbital platforms first, then use them as bases for the attack on Earth itself. Standard procedure. The transport ships moved through space carrying thousands of Krillian soldiers. Zektar stood in the command center of the lead vessel, watching Luna Base 7 grow larger on the screen. Intelligence showed it was a civilian mining operation with minimal defenses. Perfect for a quick victory that would break human morale. Landing in 2 minutes, the pilot announced. Zektar checked his weapons one final time. He carried a plasma rifle that could cut through steel, energy shields that could stop bullets, and armor that had protected him through dozens of battles. The humans had none of these advantages. The transport touched down in a cloud of dust and debris. Blast doors opened and Krillian soldiers poured out, their weapons ready. Zektar expected to see humans running in panic or waving white flags in surrender. Instead, he found himself in the middle of hell. Explosions erupted from every direction. The ground beneath their feet was covered with hidden mines that tore through Krillian armor like paper. Buildings that looked empty suddenly burst with gunfire from hidden positions. Humans appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking fast and vanishing before the aliens could respond. "Take cover," Zektar shouted, diving behind a concrete barrier as bullets whistled overhead. A young human male ran across the open ground toward a damaged communications array. Plasma bolts struck the dirt around him, but he kept running. One blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around, but he got back up and continued toward his target. "Someone stop that fool," a Krillian officer yelled. The human reached the communications equipment and began working on it with his bare hands even as blood ran down his arm. More plasma fire struck near him. He ignored it completely. "Why doesn't he retreat?" asked Sergeant Vex, crouched beside Zektar. "I don't know," Zektar replied, watching the human work frantically on the machinery. The human's name was Danny Rodriguez. Zektar would learn this later from intercepted communications. Danny was a maintenance worker, not a soldier. He had never been trained for combat or taught military tactics, but he knew that the communications array was the only way to warn other human settlements about the Krillian attack patterns. Danny finished his work just as a plasma bolt struck him in the chest. He fell beside the repaired equipment, but his sacrifice had given other humans precious information about alien weapons and tactics. "Move forward," Zektar ordered, shaken by what he had witnessed. "Secure the main complex." The Krillians advanced toward the central mining facility. It looked abandoned, its windows dark and doors sealed. But as they approached, they realized their mistake. The entire building was a trap. Humans had turned every room into a kill zone. Makeshift explosives hidden in walls, floors, and ceilings detonated as the aliens entered. Medical equipment had been converted into weapons. Surgical tools became shrapnel bombs. Even children's toys were rigged with explosives. In the medical bay, Dr. Amy Watson worked frantically to treat wounded resistance fighters while simultaneously preparing improvised weapons. She was a civilian doctor who had spent years saving lives. Now she used her knowledge of human anatomy to create more efficient ways to kill aliens. "The Krillians are in Section 7, a wounded fighter told her as she bandaged his arm. Amy nodded and activated a remote trigger. The explosion that followed brought down half of Section 7, burying dozens of alien soldiers under tons of rubble. "How many more charges do we have?" she asked. 17 in the main corridors. 12 in the ventilation system, came the reply. Amy had learned to make bombs from medical supplies in less than 6 hours. She had never seen combat before today, but she killed more Krillian soldiers than trained Marines in other battles. Zektar pushed deeper into the facility, his forces taking heavy casualties with every step. Nothing made sense. These humans had no military training, no advanced weapons, no coordinated command structure. Yet they fought with a ferocity that made battle-hardened Krillian veterans hesitate. In one corridor, he found a classroom that had been converted into a sniper position. The walls were lined with pictures drawn by human children, stick figures holding hands, bright suns, and smiling faces. In the middle of this innocent scene, an elderly human teacher waited with a rifle. She was at least 70 years old, her hair gray and her hands shaking. But when the Krillians entered her classroom, she fought like a warrior half her age. She held them off for 10 minutes before falling, and in those 10 minutes, 30 more civilians escaped through hidden tunnels. "This is madness," Sergeant Vex said as they finally secured the room. "That female was older than my grandmother. Why did she fight?" Zektar had no answer. In every previous conquest, the old and weak had surrendered first. They had begged for mercy and offered information about their defenders. But these humans seemed to consider age and weakness as reasons to fight harder, not surrender faster. The worst discovery came in the children's section of the colony. Zektar expected to find young humans hiding in fear, easy prisoners who could be used to force adult surrender. Instead, he found empty rooms and notes written in crayon. "Gone to fight the bad aliens," one note read. "We'll be back after we win." Human children, some as young as 8 years old, had voluntarily left safety to help the resistance. They carried messages, spotted alien movements, and even helped plant explosives. They treated the invasion like a deadly game they were determined to win. By the time Luna Base 7 was finally secured, Zektar had lost over 40% of his assault force. The humans had inflicted casualties that should have been impossible with their primitive weapons and untrained civilians. "Status report," War Leader Thax demanded over the communication link. "Base secured," Zektar replied. But the cost was higher than expected. "How much higher?" Zektar looked around at the devastated facility, at the bodies of humans who had died fighting rather than surrendering. "These humans don't fight like any species we've encountered before." "Explain." "They don't seem to understand the concept of acceptable losses. They're willing to sacrifice everything for even small tactical advantages." There was silence on the communication channel. Finally, Thax spoke again. "Prepare for the surface assault. Surely their military will be more reasonable than their civilians." Zektar said nothing, but he doubted it. If human civilians fought this hard, what would their actual soldiers be like? The invasion of Earth began at dawn over the city of New Chicago. Zektar watched from his command ship as thousands of Krillian drop pods streaked through the atmosphere like falling stars. Each pod carried 20 soldiers equipped with the finest weapons in the galaxy. Against a primitive human city, it should have been over in hours. Instead, it became the longest day of Zektar's military career. The first pods landed in what intelligence had marked as the commercial district. Empty office buildings and shopping centers that should have provided easy staging areas for the assault. But as soon as the Krillian soldiers stepped out of their pods, the city came alive with death. Every building had been turned into a fortress. Windows that looked empty suddenly blazed with gunfire. Rooftops that appeared abandoned revealed hidden snipers. Even the sewers beneath the streets had become tunnels of war. Section 7 is under heavy fire, came a report over Zektar's communication device. Requesting immediate support. From where? Zektar demanded. Intelligence showed this district was civilian only. The civilians are the ones shooting at us. Zektar watched his tactical display as red dots appeared across the city. Each dot represented a Krillian unit under attack. Within minutes, the entire screen was covered in red. In the ruins of what had once been a construction site, Pete Collins worked with deadly precision. He had spent 15 years building this city, laying pipes and cables, pouring concrete, and raising steel beams. Now he used that same knowledge to tear it all down. Pete knew exactly where to place explosives to bring down buildings onto advancing alien troops. He knew which tunnels connected to which basements, creating a network of hidden passages that let human fighters appear and disappear like ghosts. Most importantly, he knew that every building in the district had been prepared for this moment. Charges are set on 5th Street, he reported into his radio as plasma fire lit up the air around him. Roger that. Detonate when the aliens reach the intersection. Pete waited, counting the heavy footsteps of Krillian soldiers moving through the rubble below. When the sound was loudest, he pressed the button. The explosion brought down 3 buildings at once, burying an entire alien squad under tons of concrete and steel. 2 blocks away, 16-year-old Rachel Green sat in a basement, surrounded by computer screens and radio equipment. She had learned more about electronic warfare in the past week than most people learned in college. Her job was simple but vital. Coordinate the resistance fighters throughout the city. Snake team, enemy patrol moving toward your position from the north. She spoke into her headset while typing commands on 3 different keyboards. Copy that, Spider, moving to intercept. Tiger Group, you have 10 alien soldiers trapped in the subway tunnel. Gas lines are ready for your signal. Understood. Beginning assault now. Rachel had hacked into every security camera, every traffic light, every electronic system in the city. She could see the aliens coming before they knew where they were going. More importantly, she could coordinate attacks that made the scattered human fighters seem like a well-trained army. The aliens had better weapons and stronger armor, but the humans had something more valuable. They knew every inch of their own city. Captain Steve Adams moved through the underground tunnels with his team of 12 volunteers. None of them were professional soldiers. There was a school bus driver, 2 mechanics, a nurse, a grocery store manager, and several college students, but they had spent months preparing for this day. Target building is 200 meters ahead, Steve whispered into his radio. Looks like they're using it as a command post. The building had once been a hotel. Now it housed 50 Krillian soldiers and their communication equipment. Taking it would be suicide with conventional tactics. So Steve's team didn't use conventional tactics. They used the hotel's own systems against the occupiers. The elevators became death traps rigged with explosives that detonated when aliens tried to use them. The air conditioning system pumped poisonous gas through the vents. Even the plumbing had been weaponized, turning every bathroom into a potential bomb. Beginning assault, Steve reported. What followed was not a battle, but a carefully orchestrated destruction. The humans didn't charge into the building shooting. Instead, they turned the building itself into a weapon. Floors collapsed in sequence, trapping aliens between levels. Water pipes burst and flooded electrical systems. Gas lines leaked and ignited, turning entire floors into furnaces. By the time it was over, the hotel was a burning ruin and all 50 Krillian soldiers were dead. Steve's team had lost 3 people, but they had eliminated an entire enemy command. Ghost Zektar watched the tactical display with growing horror. Red markers were disappearing across the city as his units were destroyed one by one. But the most disturbing reports came from his intelligence officers. "Sir, we're intercepting human communications," one officer reported. "They're coordinating attacks across the entire city using civilian radio networks." "How many resistance fighters are we facing?" "That's the problem, sir. Near as we can tell, the entire civilian population is involved in the resistance." Zektar felt his scales go cold. In previous conquests, maybe 5% of the population actively resisted. Most aliens surrendered or hid until the fighting was over. But these humans had turned their entire society into a military force. What about non-combatants? Surely there are humans who just want to survive. We haven't found any, sir. Even the children are helping with intelligence gathering and supply runs. The worst revelation came when Zektar tried to use human prisoners to negotiate a ceasefire. His forces had captured an elderly human woman named Martha Hayes, who had been caught setting explosives in a subway tunnel. She was clearly a civilian, someone who should have been terrified and eager to cooperate. Instead, when Zektar offered to spare the city in exchange for human surrender, Martha laughed. "You don't understand," she said, her voice steady despite being surrounded by heavily armed aliens. "This isn't our first war. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know how to do this. Your weapons are primitive. Your soldiers are untrained civilians. Our weapons work fine. And every one of our civilians has watched war movies, played war games, read war stories their whole lives. You think we don't know how to fight dirty?" Martha was right. Humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of war against each other. Every conflict in their history had taught them new ways to kill enemies and destroy invaders. The Krillians weren't facing primitive aliens learning to fight. They were facing a species that had turned warfare into an art form. As night fell over New Chicago, Zektar counted his losses. 3,000 Krillian soldiers had landed that morning. Less than 800 were still alive and combat-ready. The humans had turned a modern city into a death trap, and themselves into its guardians. "Sir," his communication officer said quietly, "War Leader Thax is requesting a status report." Zektar looked out at the burning city, at the humans who continued, fighting even as their world burned around them. He thought about Martha Hayes and her casual confidence, about the teenager who had outsmarted his best intelligence officers, about the construction worker who had turned his life's work into weapons of war. "Tell War Leader Thax that we need reinforcements," he said finally. "How many, sir?" Zektar watched another building collapse as human resistance fighters destroyed it rather than let aliens use it for shelter. All of them. 2 weeks after the failed assault on New Chicago, Zektar found himself in a place he had never expected to be. He was sitting across from captured human soldiers in a makeshift interrogation facility, trying to understand how his superior forces were losing a war that should have been over in days. The facility had been built in the ruins of a human school. Zektar chose it because he thought the familiar surroundings might make the prisoners more cooperative. Instead, the human captives seemed more defiant than ever, as if being held in their own territory gave them strength. Major Kate Sullivan sat in the metal chair with her hands bound behind her back. She had been captured during a failed human counterattack 3 days earlier. Despite being outnumbered 10-1, her unit had managed to destroy 2 Krillian armored vehicles before being overwhelmed. "Your situation is hopeless," Zektar told her, studying her face for signs of fear. "Your cities are burning. Your military is scattered. Surrender now, and we can end this bloodshed." Kate looked at him with calm eyes that held no trace of defeat. "You still don't get it, do you? Explain. This isn't bloodshed to us. This is Tuesday." Zektar felt confused by her response. "What does that mean?" "It means we've been preparing for this war our entire lives. Every human alive has grown up watching movies about alien invasions. We've read books about fighting superior enemies. We've played games that taught us tactics. You think this is our first time dealing with invaders?" Kate was right, though Zektar didn't fully understand it yet. Human entertainment was filled with stories about fighting impossible odds and winning through determination and cleverness. Every human child had imagined what they would do if aliens invaded Earth. They had been mentally preparing for this war since they were old enough to watch television. "Your weapons are still primitive," Zektar insisted. "Your technology is centuries behind ours." "So were the weapons of every army that ever won a war," Kate replied. "The side with better guns doesn't always win. The side that wants it more usually does." In the next room, Zektar interviewed Ben Foster, a young soldier who had been found hiding in the wreckage of his destroyed unit. Ben was barely 20 years old and had been in the military for less than a year. But when Zektar asked him about human military structure, Ben's answer chilled the alien commander to his core. You want to know about our military? Ben asked, his voice shaking but his eyes still fierce. Our military isn't just the people in uniform, it's everyone. My little sister back home is learning to make bombs from chemistry textbooks. My grandmother is teaching neighborhood kids how to use hunting rifles. My dad is helping dig tunnels under the city. Why would civilians involve themselves in military operations? Ben stared at him like he was asking why water was wet. Because you're trying to conquer our home. You think we're going to just sit around and let that happen? The concept was alien to Zektar. In previous conquests, civilians had always tried to stay out of the fighting. They hid, they ran, or they surrendered quickly to avoid getting hurt. But humans seemed to take personal offense at being invaded. What about your families? Zektar asked. Don't you care if they get hurt? That's exactly why we fight, Ben said simply. Every day you stay here is another day my family is in danger. Every alien soldier I kill is one less threat to people I care about. This led to the most disturbing interview of all. Dr. Alex Turner was a military psychologist who had been captured while treating wounded soldiers at a field hospital. Unlike the others, he seemed eager to talk. You want to understand us? Dr. Turner asked. Then understand this. Humans have been fighting wars against each other for 10,000 years. We've perfected every possible way to kill our enemies and protect our families. You're not facing beginners, but you're fighting a losing battle. Our technology is superior. Technology doesn't win wars. Will does, and you made a critical mistake when you decided to invade Earth. What mistake? You united us. Dr. Turner explained something that made Zektar's blood run cold. Before the invasion, humans had been divided into hundreds of different nations that often fought each other. But the alien attack had done something that no human leader had ever accomplished. It had turned the entire species into a single army with a single goal. Before you came, Americans and Russians were enemies. Now they're sharing weapons technology. Chinese and Japanese commanders are coordinating attacks together. African nations are sending troops to help defend European cities. You didn't just invade Earth. You gave 8 billion humans a common enemy. The doctor leaned forward in his chair, and for the first time Zektar saw something that scared him more than human weapons or tactics. He saw human intelligence focused like a laser beam on a single target. We've been studying your ships, your weapons, your tactics, Dr. Turner continued. Every battle teaches us something new about how to kill you more efficiently. Your soldiers think they're fighting separate battles in different cities, but we're treating this as one big learning experience. Learning what? How to beat you. How to track your ships. How to destroy your technology. How to turn your own weapons against you. Dr. Turner smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Did you know that captured Krillian plasma rifles can be modified to work with human power sources? Did you know that your communication frequencies can be jammed using parts from human cell phones? Did you know that your ship hulls have a weakness that can be exploited using modified mining explosives? Zektar felt his heart's pounding faster. You're bluffing. Am I? How many ships have you lost in the past week to what you thought were lucky shots? The answer was 12. 12 Krillian vessels had been destroyed by what seemed like impossible human attacks. Attacks that shouldn't have been possible with primitive human technology. You see, Dr. Turner continued, humans don't just fight wars, we study them, we analyze them, we find patterns and weaknesses. Every time you use a weapon against us, we figure out how to defend against it. Every time you use a tactic, we develop a counter-tactic. You're not fighting a war of conquest anymore. You're participating in the largest military research project in human history. The final revelation came from an unexpected source. A 12-year-old human girl named Emma Clark had been found carrying messages between resistance groups. When Zektar asked her why she wasn't afraid of the aliens, her answer summed up everything he had learned. My big brother is a Marine fighting you guys in South America, she said matter-of-factly. My mom is making medicine for wounded soldiers. My dad is helping build new weapons. My teacher is coordinating evacuation routes. Why would I be afraid? This is what my family does. What do you mean? We protect each other. That's what families do. And Earth is our family. Emma looked at Zektar with the confidence of someone who had never doubted that her side would win. Besides, my brother promised me that after we beat you guys, he'd bring me back a piece of alien armor as a souvenir. That night, Zektar sat alone in his command center, reviewing the interviews. He finally understood what his forces were really fighting. Not an army, not a government, not even a species. They were fighting an idea, the idea that no one had the right to take away human freedom. And ideas, Zektar was beginning to realize, were much harder to kill than soldiers. His communication device buzzed with an incoming message from war leader Thax. The message was brief but ominous. Human ships have been detected in the Proxima system. Recommend immediate withdrawal from Sol system before they learn our home coordinates. Zektar stared at the message for a long time. The humans weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were preparing to take the war to Krillian space. The hunters had become the hunted. The evacuation order came at midnight, 3 weeks after what was supposed to be an easy conquest. Zektar received the message while watching his tactical display show more red markers disappearing across Earth's surface. Half his invasion force was gone, and the survivors were scattered across a dozen burning cities. All units prepare for immediate withdrawal. War leader Thax commanded over the communication channel. Human vessels have been spotted in 3 neighboring star systems. We cannot risk them learning our jump coordinates. Zektar began coordinating the retreat, but something felt wrong. The humans had been fighting desperately for weeks, throwing everything they had at the Krillian forces. Now suddenly their attacks had become more focused, more precise. It was as if they were herding the aliens toward specific locations. "Sir, we have a problem," his sensor operator reported. "Human ships are approaching from multiple vectors." The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Dozens of human vessels were moving toward the Krillian fleet, but these weren't the crude ships from the first battle. These vessels moved with deadly purpose, their hulls modified with what looked like Krillian technology. "How did they get our tech?" Zektar demanded. The answer came through intercepted human communications. General Henry Clark's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional as he coordinated the human counterattack. "All units, this is command. Begin Operation Payback. Use the modified weapons packages on the alien capital ships. Remember, we need at least 3 of their vessels intact for the next phase." Next phase. Zektar felt his scales crawl. The humans weren't just trying to drive off the invasion. They had been planning something bigger all along. The first human ship to engage was the UES Defiance, a destroyer that had been rebuilt using salvaged Krillian parts. Instead of ramming into alien vessels like the ships in the first battle, it fired weapons that cut through Krillian shields like they weren't there. "How are they penetrating our defenses?" Thax demanded over the communication link. "They're using our own weapon frequencies against us," came the reply from the fleet's chief engineer. "Somehow they've learned to reverse the polarity of our shield generators." More human ships joined the attack. Each one carried weapons that had been modified using captured alien technology. But worse than the weapons were the tactics. The humans fought like they knew exactly how Krillian ships moved, where their weak points were, how their crews would react to different situations. They had been watching, learning, preparing. The human ship. New Hope moved alongside a Krillian cruiser and began cutting through its hull with surgical precision. Instead of trying to destroy the vessel, they were disabling specific systems: navigation, weapons, life support. They wanted the ship and its crew intact. "They're taking prisoners," Zektar realized with growing horror. In the command center of the New Hope, Captain Derek Stone coordinated his crew with cold efficiency. His ship had been a civilian transport before the war. Now it carried a mixed crew of engineers, scientists, and soldiers who had spent weeks studying captured Krillian technology. "Target their communication array," Stone ordered. "Dr. Martinez needs to examine their quantum relay system." Dr. Maria Gonzalez worked frantically at a mobile laboratory that had been installed in the ship's cargo bay. Around her, human scientists examined pieces of alien equipment like archaeologists studying ancient artifacts. Every component told them something new about Krillian capabilities. "Captain, I've cracked their navigation database," she reported. "I know where they came from. This was what the humans had been working toward all along, not just defending Earth, but learning enough about their attackers to take the war to them. Every battle, every captured weapon, every intercepted communication had been pieces of a larger puzzle. Broadcast the coordinates to all human vessels, Stone ordered, and prepare the message probe. Across the battlefield, a small human ship broke away from the fighting and accelerated toward the edge of the solar system. It was barely larger than a shuttle, but it carried something more dangerous than any weapon the humans had built. Information. The ship's computer contained everything the humans had learned about the Krillian Empire. Ship designs, weapon specifications, star charts, military codes, and most importantly, the location of Krillian worlds. In a few hours, that information would be transmitted to human colonies across known space. Zektar watched helplessly as his retreat turned into a rout. Human ships pursued fleeing Krillian vessels with predatory efficiency. They didn't just attack randomly. They targeted specific ships, specific systems, specific crew members. It was as if they had studied every aspect of Krillian military doctrine. The final blow came from an unexpected source. A transmission reached the Krillian fleet on a frequency that should have been impossible for humans to access. When Zektar opened the channel, he found himself looking at a small human child. The girl was perhaps 10 years old, with bright eyes and a confident smile. She spoke in perfect Krillian, her pronunciation flawless despite the fact that no human should have been able to learn their language. "Hello, alien invaders," she said cheerfully. "My name is Sammy Phillips. I live in New Chicago, the city you tried to destroy." Zektar stared at the screen in shock. A child was speaking directly to his fleet using their most secure communication protocols. "I wanted to thank you for visiting our planet," Sammy continued. "You taught us so many interesting things, like how your ships work, and where you come from, and how to build weapons that can hurt you really badly." The child held up a data pad that showed star charts, ship schematics, and what looked like military deployment information. "We know where you live now," Sammy said, her young voice carrying a promise that made veteran soldiers shiver. "And we're coming to visit you too. Won't that be fun?" The transmission ended, but its message was clear. Humanity now possessed everything they needed to take the war to Krillian space. Worse, they had the will to do it. "Sir," his communication officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth's government." "Put it through." General Henry Clark's image appeared on the screen. Behind him, Zektar could see human soldiers working alongside captured Krillian equipment. "To the Krillian Empire," Clark said formally. "You came to our world believing we would surrender. You were wrong. You believed we would accept conquest. You were wrong. You believed we would forget this attack. You were most definitely wrong." Clark stepped closer to the camera, and Zektar saw something in the human's eyes that had haunted him since the first day of the invasion. Absolute determination. Earth remembers, Earth learns, and Earth will find you. The transmission cut to black, leaving Zektar alone with the knowledge that his species had made the worst possible mistake. They hadn't just failed to conquer humanity. They had turned humanity into hunters. 1 year later, Zektar sat in a Krillian council chamber, delivering his final report on the human campaign. The room was filled with military leaders who still couldn't believe that a primitive species had defeated their finest invasion force. "Recommendation?" asked the Supreme War Leader. "Classify humanity as a terminus species," Zektar replied. "Never engage them again. Avoid their space entirely, pretend they don't exist. One species cannot threaten the entire empire." Zektar thought about Sammy Phillips and her cheerful promise, about Dr. Martinez and her stolen star charts, about 8 billion humans who now knew that they weren't alone in the universe and had decided that was everyone else's problem. "This species is different," he said quietly. "They don't just fight wars, they perfect them. And they never forget an enemy." 3 months after his report, human ships were spotted near the Krillian border. They weren't invading. They were watching, learning, waiting. The hunters had become the hunted, and Earth had all the time in the universe to plan its revenge.